Hello, I'm Tamara Khan, and welcome to the ICA's Diversity and Inclusion Series, Celebration of People, where we spotlight the compliance industry's leading diversity champions. I'm joined by Ashley Robinson. Ashley currently works in the financial services sector within KYC and CDD, but has 10 years experience within financial services. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, no, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So because of our busy virtual meeting schedules, Ashley and I actually haven't had a chance to really discuss anything before this, but that kind of works because we thought what we would focus on today is how do we even start a discussion or a conversation about diversity and inclusion in the compliance world. So Ashley, on that point, what is your perspective on how we should start this conversation about diversity and inclusion, and particularly how do we start it within the compliance industry?
Okay. So I think from my own reflections, I think firstly there's some barriers that need to be overcome, but we can definitely overcome those. I'd say firstly awareness is one of those issues that we need to tackle because some people don't even realise that there's a conversation to be had in terms of diversity, and they won't realise then the huge benefits of us having that conversation, the potential it unlocks in our people by allowing them to bring themselves to work and be their whole selves as well. On top of that, I think sometimes there's fear of starting the conversation, whether it be fear of offending someone or fear of getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing and upsetting someone's feelings, and then fear of repercussions is one of those. And I'd say I've found recently myself where I've started those conversations, I admit they were uncomfortable, and I'd say they were really emotional as well in the moment, but the impact of it afterwards for myself and also for the individuals, I'd say was liberating in a sense. And I think it's because we've never had those conversations before. On the whole, within the compliance industries, within society as a whole, I'd say they're conversations we don't have on a regular basis. But the more we do have them, the more comfortable it becomes.
That's great, thank you. We ran a survey about what some of what some of the ICM members thought about the conversation of diversity and inclusion, what some of the challenges are, and they certainly brought up similar barriers to the ones that you just described about fear of repercussion, lack of understanding of people, and I think one of the things you sort of brought up was creating awareness. So how do you think we do create awareness? What are some sort of thoughts or tips from you in terms of doing that?
Well, this year in particular, I think there's been a lot of media attention, particularly from an ethnicity diversity perspective, and the awareness on that due to tragic circumstances and negative circumstances. But I think we can be positive with it as well, and it's being mindful of whether it's diversity, sexuality, or gender, being mindful of events that are about to happen and celebrating them, starting to promote them in advance. So where we know we've got religious festivals on the horizon, talking about them and celebrating them, not just being just glossing over them. If we've got International Men's Day that's coming up soon, there's International Women's Day that will take place as well next year. It's being prepared for those events and encouraging the conversation on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, you mentioned earlier about creating the possibility for everyone to bring their whole selves to the professional setting. So I think what is the best way to, I guess, effectively approach diversity and inclusion in the professional space that allows that actually enables that to happen?
Well, firstly, you have to be open and create an environment that allows people to participate. So if you're going to be hosting it, you really need to be open to having the conversation and allow people to participate freely. So anyone can start the conversation. It doesn't have to be an individual who is, identifies within a certain diversity or sexuality or anything. Anybody can start this conversation, and it can come from a perspective of you are sharing your own experiences, or you start the conversation by saying, I want to learn, or I want to encourage this conversation. We need to get comfortable having it. And current circumstances might mean that that's on a virtual basis, but you can have it with individuals, you can have it with a group of people, keep it structured or unstructured. What I found when we've held the conversations is we opened with individuals who shared some of their experiences first, just to set the scene and encourage people to let them know it's safe. We are having this conversation, but also then that empowered others to participate, whereas before they might have been reserved in starting it. Where they've been invited to the conversation and witnessed it, then gave them the courage to participate as well. I think you've got to remind people it's a sensitive topic. You've got to remind people that some people will be learning from this, but it's ultimately to build a better culture where people work in the professional space.
Those are great tips. And I think one of the things you sort of touched on was making sure there's diversity within the discussion about diversity and inclusion, and making sure it's, you know, a well-rounded group of people that are even, and perspectives and backgrounds and reasons for wanting to be part of that discussion. Do you have anything to add to that? Because I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So I think on that, it's important to not make assumptions that because an individual is, so myself, because I'm mixed race, it's important to not make assumptions that the experiences I share as a mixed race individual, every single other person who's mixed race would have encountered those as well. So it's important to recognise that the diversity within the individuals and how everyone's experience will be unique. Their stories will be unique to them.
And so you've mentioned that you've been doing, you know, some discussions, and you've been opening some conversations within your organization. So do you have any sort of tips, or how can you share a little bit of that experience with us, of how that's gone, and anything you and your teams have learned from that process?
Yeah. So tips I have, I mean, kind of repeating touching on some of the things. I think one of the biggest things I learned was you have to be open to it, and you have to acknowledge that not everyone will participate in it as well. And people might not participate either by vocalizing and joining the conversation, or they may just spectate and just listen, but that's okay. So you have to acknowledge that. At the same time, I think if you are thinking about starting one of those conversations, inform yourself before you do. So if you want to have a conversation about ethnicity, then inform yourself about some of the issues that might be faced by certain individuals and backgrounds. We're quite fortunate that there's so much information that's available out there on the social media, the internet, books, TED Talks, so much information. So tap into that before you host one of those conversations. Don't place the onus on the individuals you're trying to learn from if you're hosting it from that perspective. And if you are going to host one, try get some advocates involved, some people who are prepared to contribute to the conversation as well, because if you've got some people who are more confident about sharing their stories, then they will naturally draw more people into that conversation as well.
And it sounds like it's you know, it's something that you have to get it moving, and there's momentum that builds, and there's comfort that builds around that. So maybe initially there's a lot of fear, but it becomes a conversation that people actually become more comfortable with and aware of, and that awareness and that comfort then actually propagates itself and spreads that conversation even more.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things we found was where we first had those first conversations. We were talking in the summer. But people were responding to me, you know, via email saying that was really powerful. How can I continue this conversation? Or they then call me, email me saying, following this meeting we've had, I've then spoken to my family about it. So the ripple effect is there. People are open to it, but sometimes it's a case of awareness. People don't realise the value of having these conversations about diversity, and diversity is broad. It's not exclusive to ethnicity. It's gender, it's sexuality, it's abilities, in it's the range of things to talk about. But the more we understand each other, the better it becomes, because I know the relationships I have with some of the people where I work now are stronger for it. People will either be more open to sharing stuff with me, or they understand who I am as an individual at a personal level rather than just that corporate level.
And I think that goes back to the whole bringing your whole self
Yeah.
to your professional life, which I think in, when we're also separated due to the current environment, just feels maybe a little bit more important
Yeah,
to
I'd
do.
agree with that. I'd agree with that. I think it makes more of a difference, especially because we are so, separate, definitely.
Yeah. So how important is it to get the whole entire organization involved in these discussions? Or is it more important to focus in certain areas and spread out? Or is it more important to get senior? There's a lot of discussions about it's really important to get the senior level engagement and let it trickle down. Or is it more of a bottom up? Or do you have any sort of thoughts on what the best way is to build that momentum that we just talked about?
So I think it's important to have to everyone. My personal view is it's important to have everyone involved in that conversation, or to encourage as many people as possible to get involved in that conversation. Just because you will naturally you'll get more ideas that come from that. You're going to have more experiences to learn from, more stories to learn from. Like I said earlier, where my experiences will differ very much so to somebody else's. So if we only have a select group of people participating in that conversation, we're not very diverse then in it as well. But by definition, it's going to be those few individuals that shape and share their stories. It's better to get a broader perspective. And I do think that there's elements that if the conversation isn't taking place, regardless from what level, whether it's from a senior level downwards or from that downwards upwards, sometimes the silence can be deafening and people will be aware that the conversation is not taking place. In the world we're currently in, because of the events earlier in the year, the conversations have taken place outside of organizations. So organizations are wise to the fact that we should be having these conversations within as well. And I'm quite fortunate where I work, we do have those conversations within the organization. We've got various employee resource groups where there is a focus on sexuality, for example, or there's a diversity group, and many more, but they're open to everyone. You don't have to identify with it to be part of that. You can actively join and participate in the conversations, and you'll be an ally, or you'll just be someone who encourages the conversation. It's important for everyone, I believe, to be involved.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have, if for people in organizations that maybe don't have such a proactive approach to the one that you're in, or maybe don't feel comfortable with how the discussion is happening or indeed not happening, and just sort of maybe feel like there's more to be done, is there any, we talked about being open and so forth, but how do you instigate the right discussion? How do you drive forward the right level of discussion if you feel like it's not happening or it's not happening in the right way? Tough one, I know, but do you have any thoughts on that?
It is a tough question. I think you've got to be brave and start it. If you think it is a conversation that needs to be had, then have it. You might need to, set some expectations. If you feel, as an individual, if I'm not very knowledgeable about a topic, then I would be open in saying, I don't really know much about this. I think it's an issue. Shall we have a conversation about it? Along those levels, I think you've got to be open in acknowledging you might not be aware, or being open in acknowledging that it is an issue and you need to address it.
Yeah, I think that's just that. I really connect with that last sort of comment you made about you don't have to know, you don't have to be the expert in it, you don't have to have huge amounts of experience in it, or you don't have to know that everyone shares your view to start the conversation. But if you feel like a conversation needs to happen, then just be brave and start it. So thank you, Ashley.
I think that just expanding on that, if you are showing that vulnerability, if you will, you're being genuine in yourself, then you're going to encourage people to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining me today and for having this discussion, and hopefully the beginning of many future discussions. Thank you very much. Take care.